So during the last part of our process, we took the hood, we did all the massive amount of body work, we brought a lot of it down to bare metal, so we epoxy primer the whole thing. It's been about 4 days now, and now the next part of the process is we're going to apply our high build primer. Before we can actually apply the high build primer, now we want to sand everything smooth to 220. The next part of our process is us taking our epoxy primer and getting ready to apply our high build primer on top of it. The purpose of epoxy primer is it's going to bond very well to our bare metal. It's going to help us create a good moisture barrier to prevent against corrosion in the future to our bare metal surfaces. It helps create a uniform look to the entire panel. It makes it a little easier to see our defects, little pinholes or little areas that we may have missed if the panel hadn't been primed prior. When we sand it, we're going to start lightly block sanding 220, and then we're going to follow it by lightly block sanding 320. Epoxy primer is not for body work. This is simply for the bare metal spots. We are sanding for smoothness and to help create a better mechanical bond with the next layer of primer on top of it. Now, in preparation of paint, now we need to clean our surface. We need to make sure our surface is very clean prior to laying down our next layer of primer. Being clean is very important. I can't stress enough how important being clean is. Use clean rags, practice clean techniques, make sure you wash your hands, make sure you aren't contaminated with grease and other things. I'm wearing gloves as our fingers actually have oils on them, and these oils do have a chance to give us some sort of reaction with our paint jobs. There's so many elements when it comes to painting, and one of the elements that we can control is being clean. There's a lot of elements we can't, so the ones that we can, let's try to control them very well. Now, as we clean the panel, I'm going to take a surface prep, which is a wax and grease remover, and I'm going to drench my entire panel with it. The thought behind this is any contaminants that lay inside the panel actually have a chance to unembed themselves and raise up. From here, I wipe them off with my rag, and now I've cleaned my panel. You remove more contaminants this way rather than drenching your rag and then rubbing your rag across the entire panel. So now we're going to be mixing our primer. Here we're using a 4:1 2K high build primer. 2K just means it's two parts. One part is going to be the primer itself, and then the other part is going to be the catalyst. Here we're using a medium catalyst rated for my temperatures, which may change wherever you are located. Make sure to check your technical data sheet to see what catalyst is appropriate for your paint depending on what temperatures you live with. Now here I'm using an MPS system, and the good thing about this is they have aligners inside that make cleaning the cup super simple. So I'm going to put my liner inside, then I'm going to find the part of my cup that says 4:1. I'll be mixing 4 parts primer. So I'm going to go to my first 4 that I see, and I'm going to go add my primer up to there. From there, I'm going to add 1 part catalyst, which I'll see the second 4 next to it, and then I'll fill up to there. Time now for us to start applying our primer. Now, there's been many hours of preparation prior to this, from sanding to cleaning to overall prepping of everything that can happen. So we want to try to lay the primer as flat out the gun as possible. So here we're going to be going at a moderate speed. I'm not going too fast, I'm not going too slow. Now, the first coat of primer, you're really just trying to get the primer onto the panel. You're not worried about making the panel look really nice. Now, we're going to be moving at a 40% coverage. So we're trying to just overlap ourselves pretty consistently. Again, we're just trying to get nice, even, good layers down. We're not moving at a very fast speed. We're about 8 to 10 inches from the panel. Why do we start painting from one edge of the panel versus painting from the center? I was initially taught start from the center of the panel and work your way backwards. That way you can reach as far as you can comfortably and then work your way back, and then you can see what you need to cover on the other side. Here's the issue. When you start spraying from the center and you start working your way back, one edge of the paint is going to be wet as it's continuously coming out the gun. The first edge in the center of the panel that you laid is going to be dry. So now when we walk around our panel and we begin spraying from the center back again, now we're going to have a dry spot trying to mix with the wet spot. Now, sometimes this doesn't always mix, and this is when you can have uneven layers of your paint, especially inside the center of the panel, and especially in the center of a hood, the most important panel of a car. So instead, we're going to want to create what's called a wet edge, which is as we start painting from one side of the panel, we're going to have one edge that's going to be continuously wet as it's just coming out the gun. We want to push that entire wet edge across the entire panel. That way we have one nice, uniformed, clean look. Very important, after we finish our first coat of primer, we're going to let the panel rest for 10 to 15 minutes. Within our paint, we're adding a catalyst. A catalyst essentially is just a bunch of solvents, and that's what's going to help the panel actually dry. Now, we need these solvents to get out the panel, and that's what's going to let the paint actually dry and cure. The issue is if we don't allow enough time for the solvents to release out of each layer as we lay it, then eventually, as we stack more layers on top, the solvents are going to find their way out of the panel, and they're going to create little pop-like effects underneath your paint. This is referred to as solvent pop. And solvent pop can destroy a panel. Once you get solvent pop, there's no way to fix it. You just need to sand the panel and reapply your paint. As we apply primer, we're going to be doing some sort of body work on top of it, and we're going to be reassessing the panel and more sanding. So it's not exactly critical that we do everything as perfect as possible. But the better we can lay down some paint, the less work we have in the future. If you can lay paint with no orange peel, no dirt, no nothing, then that means you don't need a wet sand panel after. The more textures and the more fish eyes and other effects we have in the paint, the more work we have to do later to try to fix the paint to make it look just as nice as if we would lay it out correctly from our gun. Our second coat is going to be a lot like the first one, except we're going to be moving just a little bit slower as we want to put just a little bit more primer on. Now again, this is a high build primer. This primer is purposely meant for doing body work on top of it. So we are going to be just applying a lot of it so that way we can sand down and not worry about burning through the paint. Now I'm spraying all this with my DeVilbiss FLG5. Now the reason why I have this gun is, number one, DeVilbiss is a very reputable and a very amazing brand when it comes to guns. They make some of the best guns out there. As with the best guns comes a very big price tag that comes with it. The DeVilbiss FLG5 is a pretty entry-level gun that can do everything. It's good on the pockets. I paid $250 and it came with a 1.3 and a 1.8 millimeter tip. Now what's the difference of the tips? Whatever you're painting depends on what tip size you're going to be using. Our high build primer is a very thick primer and it's going to lay out very thick. That's when we're going to be using our 1.8 millimeter. It's a significantly larger hole than our 1.3. Now our 1.3 millimeter is going to be more of our finishing gun. This is going to be for our sealers, our base coats, and our clears. General rule of thumb, 1.8 strictly for primers, 1.3 is for everything else. When it comes to painting, there's no magical number when it comes to PSI. There's no set pressure that I can tell you that's going to work on every single gun. There's so many factors. You have length of hose, you have air compressor size, you have tank size, you have what type of filtration system you're using, how much it limits you, and then you have the gun itself. Now, there's no set number. You're really just looking at how the paint is being atomized throughout the gun. If you have good atomization, you have a nice spray fan pattern, then everything else is going to be fine, regardless of what the pressure. So now we're going to begin cleaning our gun. We're going to take our cup off, we're going to throw away our liners, and then we're going to start disassembling our gun. From our adapter, to our cap, to our fluid needle, to the tip, and to everything in between. We want to completely disassemble the gun and put everything inside our cup of lacquer thinner. From here, we want to clean the main body of the gun. I start off first with a paper towel, just so I can try to get most of it out, use a little bit less lacquer thinner. After, I come in with my brush, I scrub, then I run some fresh lacquer thinner through, and then I make sure I clean each part individually, make sure I wipe them down, and inspect them for any leftover paint. Very important, whenever you clean your cap, that you clean it very well, as this is the part that atomizes your paint, and this is the single most important thing that should be clean. And now, once everything's clean in our gun, we're going to reassemble our gun. We're going to wipe down the main body just so it can keep looking nice. We're going to inspect it, make sure there's no more paint on anything, and then we're ready for our next spray. So at this point, we have taken our hood down to bare metal, and we've rebuilt back from there. We've done epoxy primer, we've done urethane primer, we have a layer of body work. Now we have more epoxy primer as there was more exposed metal. And now we have the final layer of a urethane primer. Now from here, what we're going to do is we're going to do our last little bit of body work, and then we're going to get it ready for paint. So that's going to be it for this episode. In the next episode, we're going to be laying down some color, making this thing finally look nice, and getting back to building the rest of the car. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.